Hello everyone, this is Ben, and what we're going to be talking about today is dealing with criticism in a biblical way. You know, what the Bible tells us, the lessons we can learn from the Bible about dealing with criticism in a healthy way. And, you know, also I'm going to draw from things that we all have to deal with criticism in the real lives in which we live. It's just a part of life. So we're going to take a look at some really bad ways that we deal with criticism, and we're also going to take a look at some of what the Bible has to say, some of the difficulties of dealing with criticism, and the one thing I really want to focus on in this video is when criticism really gets to you more than it should, and it makes you start doing stupid things, especially in situations where it's like you should really ignore this criticism. So let's go ahead and we'll start. Essentially, what I'm talking about is criticism boils down to the opinions of other people about you, and what people think about me, my social status, how people view me is a source of much stupidity and craziness and silliness and sadness, and it's ridiculous. I've seen people betray real friendships for a few more social status points. We'll get into some of these examples of how people might deal with criticism in a bad way, and essentially sometimes the stupidity is not about dealing with criticism as much as it's about preventing criticism from ever occurring. They're so terrified that criticism may come their way that I have to prevent it from ever coming to my ears. I don't want anyone to ever even think anything bad about me. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, as we get into this, is there's sort of a two-sidedness to how we view criticism in our society, and we sort of talk out of two sides of our mouths. So out of one side of our mouths, we kind of want life to be like a Madea movie. If you ever seen Madea movies, they're real simple. My brother loves them. I would have never seen one if it wasn't for my brother, but I've seen, and they're not, they're good. But here's the thing. These movies always start out and they have very similar storylines where you have these families and these groups of people, and they're all messed up. They have these problems and these stupid things that they're doing, and they're blowing it and they're messing up somehow. There's something with the love life and the job and and the family situation that's just very wrong and needs to change. It's bad in some way. And, things go on, and then eventually the climax of the movie is Madea sits everybody down and gives them a good talking to and straightens everybody out. Now, we all wish that life was like that. Life was like a Madea movie, and you could just sit down the people who are blowing it and messing up and give them a good talking to and just straighten everybody out. Where everybody's going to sit down in this room, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get in your face and be real mean. And and we're going to be real. And essentially, here's the thing, we all, those movies are very popular because people like that, because people want that. It simplifies things. Life is not really that simple. People are not really that simple to fix. It's way more complicated than the movies, but these are movies, you know what I mean? They're not real life. They're entertainment, they're inspirational, yada. But the thing is, out of one side of our mouth, we like that whole mentality of people are messing up and somebody needs to say something to them to correct them. And we all try to do that all the time. You know, especially with the people that are more important to you. But out of the other side of our mouths, we say really, really stupid things about dealing with criticism. And, you know, when I say criticism, I mean just the general social status that we care about. You know, like, so, but here's the stupid things we say. One of them, in my personal experience, is more of the girls' stupid thing that the girls say. And one of them is the boys' stupid thing that the boys say. Although I've heard girls say the boy thing and I've heard boys say the girl thing. So, you know, maybe a real scientific, social scientific research would reveal that neither one has more of a girl bias or a boy bias. But in my personal experience, there's a girl one and a boy one. So we'll do the girl one first. The stupid thing that girls say is that it's wrong to judge people. You shouldn't judge people. Don't judge people, or I'm not judging you, and that sort of thing. Well, that's, I mean, like, when I say stupid, I mean like really stupid. Like, that's incredibly stupid because it's stupid on multiple levels. It's like, you know, like it's hard to take in how stupid that is. One of the first parts of how stupid it is like it's literally the opposite of what we love about Madea movies, because she sits everybody down and tells them how stupid they are and how they're blowing it and straightens them out. Well, okay. She's totally judging everyone, and you know those movies make a lot of money because everybody likes it. You know what I mean? I mean, come on, like it's immoral, and to not judge people. You know what I mean? Like to not make judgments about people. It's not really right. It's not really biblical. I mean, it's not a biblical idea. Shouldn't you judge Jesus? You know, the Bible tells you in Romans 10:9 that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. Well, okay, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, you have made a judgment about who Jesus is, about the moral quality of Jesus, okay? Just for starters, I mean, you've got examples in the Bible of people messing up. We're going to take a look at some of those. We're totally going to be making judgments about people. You've got to pick people in life to be role models, and you've got to pick people in life to be examples of what not to do. Can't do that without making judgments. I mean, how do you hire people to work for you without judging them? How do you pick who to fire? You know, are you just never going to fire anyone because you can't make a judgment about whether or not they're a good employee or a bad employee? You know what I mean? What is a credit score? You know what I mean? It's a judgment about how good you are about paying your bills. I mean, it's literally what it is. Why do we go to school to get diplomas? So that other people can judge us as competent at doing the job. That's exactly why we go. To be judged. We pay money to go get the judgment certificate that I passed judgment. That is exactly what it is. So it's just, this is fantastically idiotic thing to say. Fantastically stupid. It is astonishingly stupid. And what's really stupid is like, we don't do it except when we don't like the judgments people are making about us, or, you know, really it's about, you know, when I don't like the way someone is judging me or something like that, you know, or we only do it when it's convenient. Well, we don't really do it, you know. In real life, we you know, we judge people all the time, but then all of a sudden it becomes, you know, not convenient, so then all of a sudden we say it's wrong to judge. And then, worst of all, it's not biblical. The Bible doesn't teach that. Like, the Bible teaches in Matthew 7 that you shouldn't judge people more harshly than you judge yourself. That you shouldn't hold other people to a higher standard than you hold yourself. But it's not saying don't judge people. It says literally, don't remove the speck from your brother's eye until you've removed the log from your own eye. But the implication there is that, like, it would be good to remove the speck from your brother's eye. That's what Medea's doing. But Medea's got to, you know, get her life straightened out more first before she can go around doing that, you know. But I mean, this idea is actually a fundamental formal logical fallacy. Like, because as soon as you make the pronouncement that it's wrong to judge people, you are making a moral pronouncement about the way people should behave. So now you're judging all the judgers as judgers. So it's logically self-contradictory. Okay, so we've harped on that enough. Let's skip over to the other one that, in my experience, is more of a boy one, and it is 100% just as stupid. Okay, we've all heard this. I don't care what people think. Are you the kind of person that cares what people think? Well, I'm not the kind of person you are. I don't care what people think. You care what people think. I don't care what people think. Okay. That's just stupid. Okay. Like, of course you care what people think. Do you go outside fully naked? I don't think so, because you care about what people see. You care about what people think. I mean, that's just ridiculous. A lot of the same examples I just shared apply to this. Like, what, do you go to school to get a diploma? Because you want people to think that you're competent. You know what I mean? Like, do you care whether or not people think you're a criminal? I bet you care whether or not they think that. Because you don't want them to come lock you up. You know what I mean? And when you make pronouncements about how other people are messing up and you tell people what to do, and you advise people on what to do, you want them to listen to you. And in fact, this is formally self-contradictory too, because like if you really didn't care what people think, like, you wouldn't have bothered to tell me that, because you don't. As soon as you emit words from your mouth, the only purpose for doing that is to either prepare to say something to someone or to say something to another one. It is to take ideas from your brain and transmit them into some other medium, whether it's ink on a page or sound vibrations in the air. It is to, or electronic or whatever, it is to take thoughts, turn them into something physical, so that then they can go into the thoughts of another person's head. When you speak, you are literally trying to affect the thoughts of others. That is what speaking is for. And yet everyone has heard this. I don't care what people think. And there is no way you can hear it except if someone cares what someone thinks. It is ridiculous. And it's absurd, because people actually care quite a bit what other people think. When other people criticize you, it upsets you. And the reason you're saying this is because you care so much what people think, and it bothers you so much that they don't think about you the thing that you want them to think about you. Okay? Do you have political signs in your yard to let everyone know what your political view is? Maybe that's because you want to put your ideas out of your mind, bring them out in the open so they can go into other people's mind. Why? Because you actually do care what other people think. That's why you're bothering to promote what you think to others, because you care what they think. You know, the bumper stickers you have on your car, the things you tell people to do. You know, yes, of course you care what people think, okay? So, my first point is that we've got to let go of this double speak, and these stupid things we say. Now, let's go into some of why do we do this double speak. Well, part of the problem, you know, why do on the one hand we applaud people for making judgments, and in fact our prison system, I mean, like, you go before a judge, you know, and we lock up people as criminals. Do you just want to stop doing that, you know? It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. Do you want to be locked up for everyone thinking you committed a crime? You know? Maybe not, especially if you didn't commit it. Okay, so the thing is, we applaud Medea for judging people, but then we say, don't judge me, you know, or we say we don't care what people think, but then in reality, we want to straighten out what people think and get people to think the right thing so they'll do the right thing, and we don't like for people to think wrong things, even about other people, even when it's like not even affecting you. You still don't like the way that person is treating that person. It's wrong, and that's unfair how that person, yeah, of course. You know, like, some guys will get upset that, like, a guy on a sports team is not being treated fairly and he's not being given enough play time. And he's really good and they ought to put that guy in the game more. And it's like, you don't know anyone that even works for the team and has any involvement with it. And yet you're upset and you will argue with people about it. Why do you bother to argue with people if you don't care what people think? An argument is literally persuasive. Well, I don't care what people think. You care what people think? That's stupid. I don't care what people think. You are literally arguing a point to me, trying to persuade me to think what you think. When you do that, okay? People do that all the time. People have disagreements. They share their opinions, their views. This is the real world. Everything online has comments at the bottom where people share what they think. Okay? So, here's the conundrum. There's a real conundrum at work here, and it's making us kind of talk out of two sides of our mouth. Or maybe we're committing the taxi cab fallacy. So we say these stupid things when it's convenient for us to believe these stupid things. But then, when it's not convenient, we jump out. When we want to believe something else, we jump out of the taxi and we go back to believing the other thing. So I've got two Bible verses here that illuminate the point for us. But we could have picked other Bible verses. I'm just going to pick these two because I think they make the point well enough for what we need to do. And the first passage they're just verses, just one verse each. It's Proverbs chapter 21, verse 17. And it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That's from the NIV. So, that's a good passage. That we are supposed to correct each other. In other words, he's using a metaphorical example here of a knife or some kind of cutting tool. We'll just say a knife. Well, people aren't really knives. And people aren't really pieces of iron. But it's metaphorical. Alright, well, let's think of it. What makes a knife a good knife? Well, a good knife is one that cuts well. We've all used dull knives, and we've all experienced how much nicer it is to use a sharp knife to cut what you need to cut, instead of having to use a dull knife. Or a sharp saw blade, or in my case, sharp lawnmower blades. It's so nice to have sharp blades. So, sharp blades are good. That means, the purpose of a blade is to cut things. And so, the better it is at cutting things, the better the blade is. So, this whole idea of sharpening people is about making people better people. And the idea is that other people can make you a better person, which involves judging them. Correcting their errors, sharpening them up. It involves caring what people think. It won't work unless people, this verse is literally telling you to judge each other and care what each other thinks. Because as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Okay? But at the same time, we've got other Bible passages. Because that's all well and good. It's like, okay, we're in this together, man. We're gonna work through our problems together, and it's gonna be like a Medea movie. And as iron sharpens iron, so one guy dressed as a woman sharpens another. Okay? But we've got other passages from the Bible like this. And this is Psalm chapter 1, verse 1 in the NASB. And it says, blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners. Oh my goodness. So now we've got a new problem. Like, the Bible is also warning us to not listen to what some people say. So the previous passage was telling us to correct one another, listen to one another, and it's a back and forth process of, taking advice and criticism and even, affirmation, back and forth and making each other better people. But then this one is saying, you really should just ignore what the wicked tell you to do. The counsel of the wicked. Blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. So now you've got a problem where there are sometimes where you should totally listen to what somebody tells you and they're about you. You know, it's not just what someone tells you about, you know, the stock market. It's what someone tells you about you. And then there are other times where you really shouldn't listen. You know, you are blessed if you do not listen. You know what I mean? Blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. So this is the real situation. And I think this is why we talk out of both sides of our mouth. Whereas sometimes it's really good, you know, like we use different terminology, you know, like, so like, and we don't realize that like we're talking about the same thing. So like in Medea's case, we say she gives them a good talking to and straightens them out. But then when we don't like it, we say, don't judge me, or I don't care what people think. Those are really talking about the same thing. When she gives them a good talking to, she's judging them. And we're wanting them to, and when she straightens them out, that's because they care what she thought. Okay, they listen to her. The problem is both are true. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. That is true. People can help you with your problems. But the other problem is, blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners. Now, oftentimes we cover that verse in churches, and we tell people that, like, well, you know, that means people that don't go to church. But that's not what the New Testament says. Every book of the New Testament warns about false teachers or false prophets or false brothers within Christianity, within the churches. Or in the Gospels, it's not really within the church so much as within Judaism, but at the foundational level, Christianity was still basically part of Judaism. And so, I mean, Jesus literally coined the phrase wolves in sheep's clothing. And he's telling you, you know, don't listen to them. But the problem is the counsel of the wicked oftentimes doesn't appear to be the counsel of the wicked, and it is very difficult to know that it is the counsel of the wicked. So, the problem is, in real life, we don't always know if we're doing the right thing. Okay? We don't always know if your belief or your practice, whatever it is you believe or whatever you think or do, is actually the right thing. You don't actually know. And then when someone comes and tells you what they think, you don't actually know if they're right. That's just an added piece of information for you to consider. Okay? Now, if God tells you that you're a huge loser, then you are a huge loser. But if everyone, you know, all of your friends are like, you know, most of us have experience as children where we went to school, and so we know what it's like to be judged by the other kids at school. School is a very judgmental place. It's full of judgment. You literally get graded on like how smart you are all the time. You know, I always wondered, like, you know, like, why don't we teach kids to measure their body fat level at school? It's pretty simple, and it would be helpful for people to actually know if they're overweight or not. And it's like, well, that would make some kids feel bad because they're overweight, and then they would experience shame and maybe depression and maybe get bullied for being overweight. And it's like, how is that any worse than what we already do at school, though? Because, like, they get grades. You get grades at school all the time. You get graded on, like, basically how smart you are, you know. It's a combination of how educated you are, how much effort you put into it, plus your intrinsic intelligence. But you know, that's pretty. There's nothing with the body fat level that's any worse than that. You know what I mean? And it's not like, you know, if somebody's really fat, it's like, you know, there's no hiding it. Like, everybody knows, you know. You don't really hide that. It'd be funny if somebody tried. But school is a place with a lot of judgment, and then kids are really, really rude and mean to each other because they're kids and they don't know how to behave. They're learning how to behave, and it's a rough process. And kids judge each other a lot. They criticize each other a lot. And so we all know this experience of when everyone thinks you're a loser in some way, when everyone looks down on you for something. I'll give you an example from my life. I transferred to a school when I was 9 that was like just from one school to another school, and the new school, like, all they cared about was like your abilities in sports, and that was the whole basis of your social status. And like, I didn't even know how to throw a ball. Like, no one had bothered to teach me that. Like, growing up for me, with my parents are very different and have very different perspectives on things. But neither one of them saw sports as important. They both saw education and work as important. And so that was like a real culture shock for me. That like, oh, it's like I'm actually a failure as a human because of throwing and catching. I thought that was just goofing off stuff. Like in my family, it was like, being good at sports is like being good at playing Mario. It's like, okay, well, look at you, but you're goofing off. You know that, right? Whereas, in these families, like, these kids were taught something very different. Like, you have kids that make C's in school because they're missing so many classes to, go to games. You know what I mean? Where they could have had, much better grades. So I'm just trying to get us in the mindset of what it's like, as and with girls, it's certainly. I'm not a girl, and I know girls have experiences that I wouldn't know about, but from what I've seen, there's a lot of judgment and criticism that goes on with girls. It's like, it's intense. You know what I mean? It's causes depression. I mean, there's one example of one girl I saw from Florida where she actually committed suicide. And like, when girls talk about bullying, it's never physical. It's always just criticism. They're just talking about criticism and insult and, judgment and that sort of thing. And in this case, this girl committed suicide because she just couldn't get away from it. They moved her to another town, but it was still coming at her through social media, and like, she just couldn't get away from it. It just drove her crazy, and it was just coming at her all the time. Just so much criticism. So I mean, who knows what they were criticizing her about, and like, that kind of touches on what the real point of this video is. Like, why does criticism get under your skin so much sometimes, and then other times it doesn't. Like, it blows right off your shoulder. That's really the point I'm talking about, because the reality of the situation is we have unhealthy ways of dealing with criticism, because we say stupid things like don't judge people and I don't care what people think when we want to ignore criticism. But then out of the other side of our mouth, we want Medea to come straighten everybody out. Or we try to be Medea. That's not really healthy. And the conundrum is the fact that, like, not all criticism is correct. And you don't really know if you're doing the right thing necessarily. And then other people give you advice, you don't really know if it's correct or not. Okay. So now let's focus in on when criticism bugs you and like it seems like it shouldn't. Okay? And this can really become a problem. So like, the bottom line is some people are just jerks. They are criticism factories. They throw out constant insult and criticism. They're trying to put everyone down. Now, we could go into all kinds of psychoanalysis of why people do this. But the reality is, we don't actually need to, go into all of that. That's not actually necessary. Excuse me, I'm killing a bug. Okay. So, that's not actually necessary. It's it's, you know, we all know that some people are just jerks, and that's just how some people are. Okay? So, like, that's a reality of life. That's the reality of the situation. And, like, you don't really have to psychoanalyze someone to great detail to know that, like, that guy's just a jerk. And he's just got some issue where he wants to put everybody down. And he needs to deal with it, but that's not going to happen. And the point is, excuse me for a minute. The point is rather simple. Why is it that it bugs us when we know it's coming from someone who's just a big jerk? And, you know, why is it that it only bugs you some of the time? You know what I mean? Or me, or all of us. You know, this is a real thing that we all deal with. And what I want to take a look at is, like, sort of some stuff that the Bible has to say about that. Okay, so, but before we do that, I want to give some examples of, like, how criticism that comes from someone who's just a big jerk that you know you should ignore, but for some reason it still bugs you and you can't ignore it. Okay, I want to look at that. When I say still bugs you, let's go into, like, some detail about that, because, I mean, it bugs you. I literally just killed a bug that was bugging me in this house, you know. But I want to go into more detail about, like, what it means to, like, for it to bug you. What does that mean? Okay, how does this become a problem? How it bugs you? Well, one of the things it can do is it can kill your willingness to be seen failing. So, like, I'm going to use skateboarding as an example because I'm a skateboarder, and I think skateboarding is really good at kind of revealing what's going on inside people. It just kind of has that quality to it. And so that's something I do all the time. Skateboarding is weird. It's very social, but it's not a team thing. So you compare it to, like, football. Football is a team sport. But you compare it to, like, running track. Running track most of the time is not really a team sport. But it's also very, like, you're just kind of, like, you have to be really focused on what you're doing and ignoring the world. Whereas with skateboarding, you're doing your own thing on your board, but it's super social. You're very influenced by others. So one of the things that you will have in a skateboarding situation, you know, wherever you're at with other people, especially at skate parks, because that's where skaters will congregate, is you'll have people that do things. They believe they're just jerks. Like, they are the arrogant, you know, jerk person, or the person who wants to put everyone down. Okay? And they kind of have to, because there's no scoreboard to hide behind, and they can't, like, you know, like, if a person's really arrogant in, like, football, well, as long as they win the game, they can, like, their arrogance, you know, is under that, you know, I got the winning score. But at skateboarding, there's no scoreboard to let everyone know how awesome you are if you're arrogant. So, like, you have to get really creative and letting people know that. And so, one of the things that people might do is, like, you know, there's tricks you can do that they can't do. They will come out there, and anytime you do a trick that they can't do, they will immediately try the trick or, like, do the trick, you know, or, you know, do it every, you know, so that's considered very rude in skateboarding, to do, like, the exact trick that someone just did. But some people, that's exactly what they go for, because they have a real need to, like, prove that they're better than you. And then some trick that you can't do, they'll do that. And then, you know, whatever you do, they'll, like, do it. Maybe they've never done it before. They'll come close to it, you know. They might, this is where it gets real crazy. They'll sit you down and have a conversation with you about how they're better than you. You know, they might throw some insults out at you or something like that. Okay, so hopefully I've set it up. When I say that criticism can bug you when it shouldn't, what I mean is like, it can kill your willingness to be seen failing. If you're no longer willing to be seen failing, then it's definitely bugging you. Because you wouldn't normally care. If this person wasn't criticizing you, insulting you, trying to put you down, then you would just do the same things you always do. So like in skateboarding, like you may be trying to learn a new trick, and that may involve not landing the trick every time. But now that you know this person is trying to put you down, then you might, respond in an irrational way. So, like, you might take it down a notch and not try the difficult trick that you really ought to try, because you don't want this to be seen failing. Or you might, like, awesome up and, like, try a trick way beyond your level and get hurt. So, not intentionally get hurt, but, like, try to outdo that person and do something that you really shouldn't be doing. Or you might be the kind of person who will only skate when no one's around. You'll just avoid interaction. Or when anyone better than you is around. Okay? Or when, those people are around. Okay? Now, this is more common in other sports like football or something like this. You might actually cheat. Because you can, so maybe you wouldn't have cheated, and maybe you wouldn't have minded losing the game, but the person like runs you down. I remember one example, especially in team sports, it's possible to play the head game and win by mentally messing with your opponent with things you say. And we all know you can do this. Like, you can throw criticism out and it'll bother someone so much that they'll mess up. Like, I've seen this where this guy was pretty good at basketball. He could shoot really well. And it was hard to block a shot. And there was a younger kid guarding him defensively. And, but the guy who was better and older and more talented, I don't know about talented, but like, he was better at basketball and he could have easily scored. He was overweight. It wasn't really affecting his gameplay. He was young, and he wasn't that overweight where he couldn't he could run up and down the court, and it was a small court. Well, this young boy, this young 15-year-old boy, just kept saying, "Come on, slow, you're slow. Come on, slow, you're slow. Look how slow you are." Kept saying that, and so the other guy who was like a few years older, it just bothered him to be criticized, and it bothered him so much that he messed up an easy basket, and then it was like he couldn't score for the rest of the game. And this guy was pretty good. He could score a lot of points. He had some good shots. He had good ball handling skills, but it bothered him so much that he got that criticism. And this kid was just a jerk. He wasn't even a jerk. He was just saying that because he wanted to win the game. He was just saying that just to see if it would work. And it totally worked. I mean, that's just an example of what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like, it was ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, that was just, it was clear that it bothered him. And we all know that. And, and there are people that are jerks that like, and we don't need to go into detailed psychoanalysis. We can just say jerks. But like, that's how they operate. They just throw out criticism in hopes that it will bug you. Okay? They just throw it out all the time. And that's their way, one of their main ways they deal with people. Now, there is a special case that I do want to talk about, and this is narcissism personality disorder, because it's more prevalent than I realized. And so for this, for the narcissist, like, okay, so we could, there's so much to say about this. I'm just going to do a real short thing. But like, when it comes to this, what this person is doing is they have a delusional self-identity that is not real. It is not a true version of who they are. So like, this person I'll give you an example. It'd be easier to understand with just an example. We'll use an example of a woman. But it doesn't have to be a woman. In fact, most of the time narcissists are men. But I'm just going to use the example of women because this example just works really well and people seem to understand how narcissism works. So they have a delusional self-identity. So let's say in the example that this woman is a terrible friend to this other woman. She is not even a friend at all. She's just a monster. She tries to mess up, she dumps on everything that the other woman does. She, tries to mess up the other woman's relationships, spread rumors about her, passive-aggressive behavior overload. She is not even remotely a friend. But, sometimes people have those, especially with passive-aggressive stuff, like, it's done in such a way so that you can't prove it, So, like, you're basically too big of a wuss to, like, admit what you think, so you hide, but, like, you really hate the person, So, the thing is, they might still be friends on some level, but the bottom line is this woman A is not the friend of woman B at all. She is an enemy times 1,000. But woman A has a delusional self-identity where she is the greatest friend to woman B and the greatest friend anyone could possibly have. When in reality, that's not true. She's a huge enemy. She just ruins that person's life all the time. But in her delusional version of reality, she's the greatest friend ever. So, what she'll do is when woman B's birthday rolls around, she'll throw a birthday party for woman B and do a big post on social media talking about how their friendship is so wonderful. And here's the thing. The narcissist is crazy, is out of touch with reality. In our case, she's not a friend at all. She's the worst friend ever, but she thinks she's the best friend ever. She throws the birthday party, and then she does the post on social media about the birthday party. If anyone clicks like or whatever on that post or comments about how wonderful that is, then for the narcissist woman, that will confirm to her that her delusions are in fact true. So, like, that's how that works. The interesting thing about narcissism personality disorder is that, like, it's all about social status. The person is manipulating others so that others will affirm to her, or most of the time him, the delusory self-identity that is unreal, and the person, he or she knows it's unreal, but wants to believe this imaginary version of reality, but is not willing to just be regular crazy and just believe things for no reason at all. Rather, this person will keep one foot in reality by manipulating other people to push it back on them. So what you have is, for this type of person, social status is everything, because they can't separate who they are from their what society says they are, what their social status says they are. There is no separation, because they have let go of any grip on who they really are, and they've given that up, and they've said, as long as I can get people to affirm this fake identity for me in some way, then that's who I am. And so the thing is, they will betray real friendships for the sake of social status, because social status is more important, because it is who they are. So this kind of person, it's obvious. Like, I just bring it up because once you see this, it's like, okay, this kind of person is not going to take criticism well at all. And this kind of leads up to like the point we're going to make in this video. the flip side of this is that criticism can be a good thing, even from jerks sometimes. I mean, like, what if the jerk's right? You know what I mean? Like, and the old saying goes, to the man with a hammer, everything's a nail, so he hits everything like it's a nail, but, like, not everything's a nail. Not everything's not a nail. Sometimes, he's hitting the right thing with the right tool. And even jerks can still be a good example of, like, what not to do. And one of the problems is, like, you don't really know what to do. Okay? But the question is, why do we so often, why does this, like, mess us up? Well, why did that guy, he just couldn't play basketball anymore that day because someone was just calling him slow. You're slow? You're slow? Well, he was overweight. Okay? Why did that bother him? Why couldn't he just play basketball? Because, like, why couldn't he sit back and say, well, that guy's just saying that because he wants to win the game. And it's just like, it's no different from, like, him trying to block my shot or steal the ball or score points. It's just a game. You don't have to take it seriously. Or why do people get so upset when comedians say certain things, That was very offensive, Why does criticism bother us sometimes when it really shouldn't? Because it's coming from someone who's just a jerk. Okay? And, sometimes we sit back and we just say, well, that person is insecure about something in their life, and we psychoanalyze the person that criticized you. And I think we don't need to do that. That is the mistake. Don't sit back and, let's say that this, I'll give the girl example again. Let's say that a girl is really critical of you in some way. You can sit back and say, oh, she's just criticizing me because I'm really pretty and she's jealous. If the criticism is bugging you, and really bugging you, and now sometimes it's not bugging you, like it's not bugging Medea, she just, and she goes through most of the movie just ignoring it until eventually she realizes these people are all messed up and she has to sit them down and give them a good talking to. So just cause you're saying something about the criticism or dealing with it or considering it doesn't mean it's bugging you. I'm talking about when it's really bugging you, when it makes you do stupid things. Like you can't even play basketball or you won't even try your trick because you've been so criticized. That's ridiculous. Like if you hadn't been criticized, you would have tried the trick or you would have made the shot. But the criticism got to you. Why did it get to you? Especially when it's coming from a moron. Someone is just being a big jerk and just criticize everyone and someone is an idiot. Why do you care? Okay? It doesn't do you good to just psychoanalyze the person's personal deep down insecurities. That is a mistake. You don't need to go to a great level of detail analyzing that person to know they're a jerk. Okay? Sometimes we will sacrifice our morals. We'll cheat in a game. We'll say rude things we ought not to say. Sometimes we'll sacrifice our rationality. In skateboarding, it's really, it makes it more obvious because, like, for you to try a difficult trick, you have to be in, like, a really good headspace. And when someone's criticism it makes it more obvious that something's bothering you than it normally would. You can't perform athletically to a high degree of precision without kind of being in a good mentality for that. If something's bugging you, then it's like it just ruins your game. So now let's take a look at some stuff the Bible says about this. Okay? And to examine this, what I want to do is switch gears. Now, one of the more interesting audiobooks that I've ever listened to was actually Dennis Prager's commentary on Genesis. Now, Dennis Prager is a Jew. He's a Jewish man. He's not a Christian. So, it was very fascinating for me because he didn't have the New Testament as part of his, he just had the Old Testament of the Bible. There's no New Testament for Jews. So it was very interesting to me. It really dug into Genesis to draw moral lessons and guidelines and ways of living from Genesis, things that had just flown right by me. But because he's a Jew and he doesn't have all of these wonderful, he doesn't have the Sermon on the Mount and, the book of Colossians and all that. So he's really got to dig into Genesis. And there was interesting things that were discovered from Genesis. One was that when you are jealous, that's because you're bitter about something in your own life. It doesn't really have so much to do with that person. It's not really about what that person has that you don't have. That's normally what we think of jealousy is when you don't like that person has something you don't have. But the point that he draws from Genesis and that Jews have drawn for centuries is that jealousy is really about being bitter about something in your own life that you oftentimes don't realize you're bitter about. You can have like sort of subconscious bitterness. So the example is when Joseph's brothers, the sons of Jacob, are jealous of Joseph for his many-colored coat. And really the many-colored coat represented his father's favoritism. And the jealousy stemmed from the fact that they were really bitter about how their father treated them. It wasn't so much that Joseph was favored above them. It was rather that he didn't love their mother. And he didn't love any of their mother. He never wanted to marry their mother. He was tricked into marrying their mother. And they were just the unwanted children. If somebody is treated with favoritism, it wouldn't necessarily bother you unless you really don't like your situation. But sometimes you can go through life thinking your situation's okay, and then you see someone with a better situation and it really bothers you. That's jealousy. My point is, you can actually be bitter about your situation and not realize it. And so, really, jealousy is actually very beneficial. Because when someone else has something that you don't have and you're really jealous of them, that's actually a very helpful lesson from Jesus. Jesus is helping you right now. Simon the sorcerer in the book of Acts offers money to Peter and John, I think. Maybe it's Peter and James, but I think it's Peter and John, for the gift of the Holy Spirit. He wants to be able to give people the Holy Spirit by laying on hands. And so he wants what they have. He's jealous of what they have. And Peter says, I can see that you are trapped in bitterness. And the interesting thing was that this guy Simon was actually a big shot. It says in the story that he is the power that is called great. But then he immediately is jealous of Peter and John for having something that he didn't have. And Peter's point is that it's the same one from Genesis. The real issue here is that you're actually bitter about your situation. Something in your situation. Peter says your heart is not right before God. And of course, in Peter's day, heart did not mean his emotional self. It meant your mind is not right before God. Okay? So I guess I've noticed lately that we need to point that out. That it's not talking about your emotional. He's talking about all of your mental faculties. They're all off. Okay. It can actually be a really good, whenever you experience jealousy, that's great because that's letting you know that there's something in your life that you're really bitter about. And you're upset about that situation, but you haven't really recognized it. And now you need to sit back, and the bitterness, the jealousy that you're experiencing will actually directly connect to whatever it is you're bitter about. And it's a perfect time to pray. So it's actually a really useful sanctification tool. Okay. Another one Dennis Prager drew is that gratitude is the key to happiness. And I think even the Dalai Lama said this. But the example he's talking about, he says, you look at Isaac and then you look at his sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau are not happy in their lives, and Isaac is. and what was really the difference. And he says you look at the whole scope of Genesis, and you see the difference between people who are happy and people who are unhappy. It's not really a difference in what they have. It's a difference in how grateful they are for what they have. That when you're unhappy in life, it's really about the fact that you're not grateful for the things that you have. And in fact, psychologists say just sitting back and being thankful for the things you have will affect your happiness. It won't make you have more things. But like, it's possible to be really sad and depressed and get really down about how terrible your life is. And the point is, like, you had a lot of that in Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau. And why? What is it that there was so terrible? Their father was born in a very similar situation, and he wasn't unhappy. And the difference was he was grateful for the things that he had. He was glad to have what he had. But they weren't grateful for the things they had. Okay? And so, what I did, and this is the next point, and this is the point I really want to make with this video, is that I said, okay, is there another lesson we can draw about when someone deals with criticism in a really irrational, immoral way? And then it was like, it took me a while, but then I was like, oh, the answer's obvious. It's in the next book of the Bible, Moses and Pharaoh. Pharaoh is this guy who is a brutal slave master to the Hebrews, to the Israelites. And he is essentially being criticized by Moses. Now, Moses is not a jerk, but Pharaoh is this guy who's going through his life, and there's no reason for him to think that he's doing anything wrong. And then this criticism comes at him, and he does not deal with it in a healthy way. One of the most interesting things that goes on with Pharaoh is that he repeatedly is persuaded to let the people go. And from all what we can tell, he's really persuaded. And even if he wasn't persuaded and he was just lying, well, he should have been persuaded. Considering these 10 plagues and all of the signs that Moses does too, in addition to the 10 plagues, it's like, you're an idiot, Pharaoh, for not letting the people go. You're an arrogant fool. So, and then he says, okay, I'll let the people go. And then Moses prays and God takes away the plague. And then Pharaoh changes his mind and he's not going to let people go. Okay, here's the thing. True arrogance is always in opposition to clear evidence. Like, you can think that you're awesome, but if you don't have any good justification for, or maybe if you have good reason for thinking you're awesome, then you're not really arrogant, you know what I mean? You don't really become arrogant until you have good evidence that you're not as awesome as you think you are, and you're refusing to accept it. So, like, if you are a little kid and you think you're the smartest person in the world because you won the 2nd grade spelling bee, well, you're not really arrogant for thinking you're the smartest person in the world because you don't really understand how big the world is. You know what I mean? But like, you're not really arrogant, you're just a little kid. You don't know any better. But you are arrogant when, like, there's clear evidence of the situation and you're refusing to accept it and you're really messing up. And that's what's going on with Pharaoh. Pharaoh has way too much evidence that he is messing up. God is sending like all this like evidence to him that like you really should let the people go. And it would be a really bad idea to not let the people go. And there's all these warnings, it's just going to get worse, and then like all these bad things keep happening, and he can't accept it. So Pharaoh is not handling the criticism well at all. it's just irrational, and it's destroying his nation, and he should know better. And so here's my point. If arrogance is always in opposition to clear evidence, then, and essentially, arrogance is when we don't handle criticism well. You know what I mean? Like those examples I had before, that was all essentially arrogance. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you're afraid to, you avoid interaction with others because you don't want to be seen messing up. Maybe you're full-blown narcissistic. Maybe you interact with others, but you make sure that you don't do anything beyond your skill level because you don't want to be seen messing up. Or maybe you just like are ridiculously arrogant and you try things that you know you can't do because you want to be seen as awesome. You know, or maybe you cheat. You know, those are all examples of things people do, ridiculous things people do. It's arrogance. Arrogance is that is when we deal with criticism in an unhealthy, immoral, or irrational way. In Pharaoh's case, the issue was, it was incredibly irrational. He should have, and from what we see in the story, he's like really persuaded to let people go. I think it says, you know, his heart was softened, but then he goes back and hardens it afterwards. Which we understand, it's this hardening and softening of the heart, it's hardening and softening of the mind. He's like literally changing his mind back and forth. Because the evidence was so clear that Pharaoh should have let the people go, then on some level he must have been aware of how wrong he was. And awareness of how wrong you are is shame. That is what shame is. But he is refusing to accept how wrong he is. So, my point is, arrogance always comes with a hidden, unresolved shame. When someone criticizes you and it bugs you, it's because there's something you're ashamed about that you haven't dealt with. Pharaoh did not deal with his shame well at all. And even after he did let the people go, then he changed his mind again and was going to go kill them all. And then his whole army got destroyed. Okay? So this was a very arrogant man. And he had mountains of evidence that he was in the wrong. And that he would be very foolish for doing the things that he kept on doing. And because he had all this evidence, then he must have on some level been aware of how wrong he was. Especially given the fact that he changed his mind, let the people go, and then changed his mind again. Okay? So arrogance comes with hidden, unresolved shame. Okay, so how do you resolve shame? There's only two ways to properly resolve shame. You have to address it. You either forgive yourself for being in the wrong, or you accept that you didn't really do anything wrong. And what I mean by that is sometimes we fail, but we didn't actually do anything wrong, and that can be incredibly difficult to accept. Especially when we let people down and we swore that we would never let people down. And, you know, sometimes we just prefer to think that we didn't let them down before we'll accept that we let them down and we were powerless not to let them down. That can bother you just as much. But like the reality is, if on some subconscious level, you know, you're ungrateful for what you have or you're bitter about your life, well, you can be ashamed of how you've lived subconsciously, deep down, and it can be unaddressed. And sometimes we can be ashamed of ourselves for failing when we really couldn't have done any better. But we're ashamed of ourselves because we're a failure. When in reality, like, there's nothing you could have done. But we can't accept that there's nothing we could have done because we don't like that feeling of powerlessness. and that like you're really in God's hands, and you can't fix everyone's problems, or you can't even fix your problems. We don't like that. Sometimes that really bothers us. Or maybe you did do something wrong and you haven't forgiven yourself. So when someone criticizes you and it bugs you, and especially when you know this person is a fool who just criticizes everyone, and yet the criticism still bothers you, then that means that you're probably on some level ashamed. One of the most interesting things with girls is hair. Girls take hair very seriously, and then they criticize each other's hair very intensely. And there's all kinds of hair judgment. And the thing is, like, I'll just use the example, like, if you're a girl and someone criticizes your hair and it really bothers you, that's probably because on some level deep down, you have some level of shame about how you do your hair or what's going on with your hair. And what you need to do is either A, forgive yourself for not taking the time to do your hair, or B, accept the fact that you don't have the best hair in the world. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe you're just born without, I don't know any female in this world who's completely happy with her hair, except, of course, for these jerks, who probably deep down have more shame than any of us. That's just one example. Money is a big one. People carry shame about their inability to pay for everything that their kids want. And you either have to A, forgive yourself for not performing, for messing up somewhere along the line, or B, accept the fact that there was nothing you could do. But you've got to address this shame. And so when criticism comes at you and it really bugs you, that's because there's some arrogance there that, like, maybe you didn't realize was there, and deep down there's some shame there that maybe you didn't realize was there. Now, the thing about criticism is criticism can be both subtle and overt. And sometimes subtle criticism can bug us more than overt criticism. So I'll use a skateboarding example. I've seen kids who literally will sit you down and have a talk with you about how they're better than you. And that's really annoying, but that kind of overt criticism can be easier to brush aside. But subtle criticism can be really ambiguous, like when the guy does your exact trick right behind you, and then does some trick you can't do. It's like, why are you doing that, dude? You obviously have an issue. But the issue with subtle criticism is that you don't actually know exactly what they're specifically, in a detailed way, trying to say. You don't know what conclusion they're drawing. You just know a key premise in their argument. But, like, that means you have to sit there and think of all the possible things they could be saying. And some of them may bother you and some of them may not. And so maybe he's just saying this, and if he's saying this, then it's like, that doesn't really bother me so much, and it won't bug me, and I can keep on, and it won't mess with my head, and I can make my shot, and I can land my trick. Or maybe it's something that, like, really bugs you, and then you've got some arrogance to deal with because there's some unresolved, unaddressed, unrecognized shame about something. Okay? And that can be really difficult with subtle criticism because people love to do, especially these narcissists we're talking about, they love to do all kinds of little subtle things that come at you as criticism, and it's not really criticism from them. It's like, it's just their own ego. They're trying to inflate their own ego in every little way they can, So, like, but it can be really subtle. So the problem is that criticism can be incredibly useful. Iron can sharpen iron as one man sharpens another. Or it can be incredibly useless. It can be the counsel of the wicked. And it can come from people who want to put you down for a variety of bad reasons. Maybe they're just mean. Maybe they're selfish. Maybe they're narcissistic. Maybe they're just arrogant themselves. And so, my point is, it can be difficult to know if the criticism was helpful or not. But what it can do is it can reveal unrecognized shame. When it's bugging you and making you become irrational or immoral, and it's really getting to you, that's a good indication that you need to, there's some unrecognized shame there. That, like, it can come from, even if it comes from a jerk that you really shouldn't listen to. In Pharaoh's case, he clearly was arrogant. And he wasn't willing to accept criticism. And the bottom line is, criticism can come from people who just jerks are probably going to throw out more criticism than the rest of us, because that's just what they do. They just criticize all the time, and that's how they deal with people. And I talked to one young man the other day, and this was interesting. Like, he was in a weird situation with a girl that he was kind of with. But then she had her previous boyfriend on the phone. And then, like, he wanted to make the other guy... He literally told me this. Like, he wanted to make the other guy the previous boyfriend. And he's not even really the boyfriend yet. But she has an ex-boyfriend. So he wanted to make that guy feel real threatened and afraid, or feel bad about himself. So that he would... Because this person is a very, like, kind of paranoid guy. So he wanted to make the other guy... So he's, like, real threatened all the time. Because it's not because he's arrogant or mean or selfish. He's just scared. He's scared this person might do something to him. So he, like, mentally will manipulate people to leave him alone because he's scared of them. So, like, what he told me he did was, like, he just started laughing at the guy to make the guy feel foolish. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, he's just throwing out subtle criticism, at something the ex-boyfriend said, to make him feel like, to bring up some sort of, to reveal some arrogance, and then therefore some unrecognized shame. Pharaoh was arrogant. And he probably didn't realize he was arrogant. He didn't think he was arrogant until Moses comes along. And even then, he didn't really think he was arrogant. But arrogance is essentially the unwillingness to accept, some shame that you really should accept. And sometimes you can have unrecognized arrogance. Like, Pharaoh was probably going through his life thinking, he was just normal Pharaoh. He doesn't, But then all this stuff happens, and it reveals, like, how incredibly arrogant he is, and how he's unwilling to accept how, the clear evidence that he should be ashamed of himself. Well, when you are criticized by someone that's, I don't know, that person's just insecure and they're just compensating for their own insecurity, don't go into that. If it's bugging you, it's because there's some unrecognized arrogance, and there's something you're ashamed about, and you need to address it. Okay? You need to address it. And maybe it's something that was just beyond your power, and and you haven't accepted the fact that you can't do everything that you think you can do. Okay? Or maybe you just need to forgive yourself for messing up. Listen, if God can forgive you, then you can forgive yourself. For whatever it is. For not landing the trick, for not putting in the time being as good at basketball, for not putting in the time doing the best hair every day. If God can forgive you for your sins, and Jesus Christ can die on the cross for you, then you can forgive yourself for messing up at something too. And you don't really have a right not to. Okay? As Romans 8 says, if God is for us, who can be against us? Who is it now that condemns us? those are good words. Right? What shall we say in response to these things? Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Who then is the one who condemns? That includes you condemning yourself. Because Paul says here, no one. Christ Jesus who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God, and is also interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble, or hardship, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus the Lord ours. Okay? That is my point. I have made the point that I was trying to make, I hope. I'll give this a listen, and if I don't need to add anything, praise the Lord, we'll upload it. Have a lovely day.